My name is Violet, and I'm 32 years old. For 5 years, I rented an apartment from my parents, always paying on time and taking excellent care of their property. I thought our arrangement was secure until they suddenly demanded I vacate within 30 days to make room for my pregnant sister and her fiancé. The betrayal cut deep, especially since I had been such a reliable tenant. Little did they know that their decision would set off a chain of events that would change our family dynamic forever. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt blindsided by family. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. I've always been the responsible one in my family. Since I was young, my parents Martha and Richard counted on me to be the level-headed daughter who never caused trouble. I studied hard, got good grades, and eventually pursued a degree in accounting. By the time I was 27, I had secured a position at Westlake Financial Partners, a respected firm in our city. My career was on a steady upward trajectory, and I took pride in my financial independence. My younger sister Jessica, on the other hand, had a completely different reputation in our family. 6 years my junior at 26, Jessica had always been the apple of our parents' eyes despite her impulsive nature and history of poor decisions. Whether it was dropping out of college to pursue a modeling career that never materialized, or the series of questionable boyfriends who seemed to disappear when money got tight, Jessica always landed softly because our parents cushioned her falls. "She's just finding herself," my mother would say whenever I expressed concern about the pattern. "Not everyone can be as straight-laced as you, Violet," my father would add, not realizing how his words minimized my choices and sacrifices. Despite this dynamic, I maintained a cordial relationship with my family. Sunday dinners were a tradition, and I showed up faithfully each week, listening to Jessica's latest adventures while my parents beamed at her stories. The apartment arrangement began 5 years ago when my parents decided to invest in real estate. They purchased a 2-bedroom unit in Oakwood Heights, a nice neighborhood about 15 minutes from my office. The property needed some work, but it had potential. "We were thinking," my father said over dinner shortly after the purchase, "that you might want to rent it from us. We'd give you the family rate, of course." The family rate was $1 to $500 per month, which was reasonable for the area. I agreed, thinking it would be a win-win. They'd have a reliable tenant, and I'd have a nice place to live without dealing with the unpredictability of landlords who weren't family. Over the years, I invested my own time and money into the apartment. I painted the walls a warm cream color, installed new light fixtures, and even paid to have the bathroom updated when the shower started leaking. My parents seemed appreciative, commenting on how well I maintained their investment. For 5 years, I never missed a payment. The rent money was automatically transferred from my account to theirs on the 1st of each month. I handled all minor repairs myself and promptly notified them of any issues that needed professional attention. By all accounts, I was the perfect tenant. Our family dynamics continued their usual pattern during these 5 years. Sunday dinners remained a constant, with Jessica floating in and out of various jobs and relationships. My parents continued to offer her financial support whenever needed, which seemed to be increasingly often. 3 weeks before everything changed, Jessica made a dramatic announcement at Sunday dinner. "I'm pregnant," she exclaimed, holding up her left hand to reveal an engagement ring. "And Ryan and I are getting married." The table erupted in excitement. My parents jumped up to hug Jessica and her boyfriend Ryan, whom she'd been dating for only 8 months. Ryan was a personal trainer who worked at the gym Jessica had joined at the start of the year. He seemed nice enough, if a bit quiet, and appeared genuinely happy about the baby news. "Congratulations," I said, giving my sister a warm hug. Despite my concerns about the whirlwind nature of their relationship, I was genuinely happy for her. "I'm going to be an aunt." "And we're going to be grandparents," my mother exclaimed, tears in her eyes. "This calls for champagne. Well, sparkling cider for Jessica, of course." As my father popped open a bottle of expensive champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion, My mother turned to Jessica. "Don't you worry about a thing, sweetheart. We'll help you get everything you need for the baby." Looking back, I should have noticed the subtle signs that something was brewing. Throughout the evening, my parents asked casual questions about my lease agreement. Had we ever formally signed anything? Was it month to month? Did I have long-term plans to stay in the apartment? At the time, I thought they were just making conversation, or perhaps considering selling the property. I answered honestly, explaining that while we had signed a lease initially, it had evolved into a month-to-month arrangement over the years. There were other hints, too. Comments about how a single person really didn't need so much space. Hushed conversations between my parents that abruptly stopped when I entered the room. But I was blind to the gathering storm, secure in the belief that our arrangement was mutually beneficial, and that my parents respected me as both a daughter and a tenant. How wrong I was. 2 weeks after Jessica's announcement, I received a text from my mother asking me to come over for dinner on Tuesday night. This was unusual, as our family gatherings typically happened on Sundays. Still, I didn't think much of it and agreed to be there at 7. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, the atmosphere felt different immediately. My mother greeted me with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She seemed nervous, fidgeting with her necklace the way she did when she was anxious. My father, usually warm and jovial, had adopted a businesslike demeanor that put me on edge. "Jessica and Ryan will be joining us," my mother mentioned casually as she led me to the dining room. The table was set for 5 people and a bottle of wine was already open and breathing. Whatever this dinner was about, my parents had planned it carefully. Jessica and Ryan arrived about 10 minutes after me. My sister seemed unusually confident, almost smug, while Ryan appeared uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact with me as they sat down across the table. After an awkward round of small talk about the weather and my parents' recent golf game, my father cleared his throat just as my mother brought out the main course, a pot roast that was one of my childhood favorites. "Violet," my father began, his tone formal. "We wanted to talk to you about the apartment." I felt a small knot of apprehension form in my stomach, but tried to remain calm. "Is something wrong? Do you need me to take care of some repairs?" "No, nothing like that," he said, glancing at my mother, who had taken her seat but wasn't touching her food. "The thing is, with Jessica and Ryan expecting a baby, they're going to need a place to start their family." The knot in my stomach tightened as I began to understand where this conversation was heading. "We've been thinking," my mother jumped in, her voice high and tight, "that it makes sense for them to move into the apartment. It's a perfect starter home for a young family." "It's just temporary," she added, though her inability to maintain eye contact told me she was lying. "Just until they can find a place of their own." I looked at Jessica, who was studying her plate with intense interest. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, still not meeting my gaze. "You want me to move out?" I finally asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the shock coursing through me. "We need you to be out within 30 days, my father stated, as if he were talking to a stranger rather than his daughter. "Jessica's pregnancy is progressing, and they need to get settled before the baby comes." "But I've lived there for 5 years, I protested. "I've never missed a payment. I've maintained the property, even made improvements with my own money." "This isn't about your reliability as a tenant, Violet," my father said dismissively. "This is about family needs. Jessica and Ryan are starting a family, and they need our support." The unspoken implication hung in the air. Jessica's needs were more important than mine. Her new family took precedence over my stable single life. "Don't be selfish, Vi," Jessica finally spoke, looking at me with an entitled expression that made my blood boil. "You can find another apartment easily. You have a good job and no responsibilities. We have a baby coming." I felt as though I'd been slapped. 5 years of perfect tenancy, countless family dinners where I listened to Jessica's drama without judgment, and now I was being called selfish for expecting basic courtesy and respect. Have you considered the legal implications here? I asked, addressing my parents. There are tenant rights laws that protect against this kind of sudden eviction. My father's expression hardened. We're not evicting you. We're asking you as family to understand and cooperate. Surely you don't want to make this a legal issue? Think about what that would do to your mother. And there it was, the emotional manipulation that had always worked on me in the past. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, though I noticed no actual tears had fallen. I need to go, I said, placing my napkin beside my untouched dinner and standing up. My hands were shaking, but I was determined not to break down in front of them. I'll think about what you've said and let you know my decision. There isn't really a decision to make, Violet, my father called after me as I headed for the door. We need you out in 30 days. Family comes first. I managed to hold my tears until I reached my car. As I sat in the darkness, the reality of what had just happened crashed over me. My own parents were choosing my sister over me again, but this time, they were literally taking the roof from over my head to do it. I drove home that night, not to the apartment that I had lovingly maintained for 5 years, but to a place that now felt temporary, tainted by betrayal, and the knowledge that to my family, I would always come second. The days following that dinner were a blur of emotions. At first, I experienced a strange sense of denial, hoping that my parents would call to say they'd reconsidered or that Jessica and Ryan had found another place. But the call never came. Instead, my mother texted the next day, asking when I might be able to let Jessica see the apartment to start planning. Reality hit hard, bringing with it a wave of anger that made it difficult to concentrate at work. I found myself staring at spreadsheets without seeing the numbers, my mind replaying the dinner conversation over and over. Sleep became elusive, and when I did manage to drift off, I'd wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing. 3 days after the dinner, I finally broke down and called my best friend Amanda. They did what? Amanda exclaimed after I explained the situation. That's beyond messed up, Vi. They can't just throw you out because Princess Jessica is having a baby. Hearing someone else's outrage validated my feelings, and the tears I'd been holding back flowed freely. Apparently they can. My dad made it clear that there's no room for discussion. Have you looked into your legal rights? Amanda asked. I know they're your parents, but you've been a tenant there for years. You have rights. It was a good suggestion, and the next day I scheduled a consultation with Lisa Morgan, an attorney specializing in tenant rights. Her office was in a modest building downtown filled with leafy plants and comfortable furniture that put me at ease. Based on what you've told me, Lisa said after I explained my situation, you definitely have some legal protections. Month-to-month tenancy still requires proper notice for termination, and 30 days is the minimum. Additionally, they can't evict you simply to move in family members unless there's a specific clause in your original lease allowing for it. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. So, they can't legally force me out? Lisa's expression turned cautious. Well, there is a loophole they might exploit. If they claim they're taking the property off the rental market entirely, they could potentially end your tenancy legally. But if they then immediately rent to your sister, even at a reduced rate or for free, you might have grounds to fight it. She leaned forward, her expression sympathetic. I have to ask, though, are you sure you want to pursue legal action against your parents? Family disputes that enter the legal system tend to create lasting damage to relationships. Her question gave me pause. Despite their betrayal, these were still my parents. And Jessica, despite her entitled attitude, was still my sister. Did I really want to drag our family through a legal battle? After careful consideration, I decided against pursuing legal action. Instead, I would focus my energy on finding a new place to live within the 30-day deadline. It wasn't fair, but it seemed like the path that would cause the least long-term damage. The apartment hunting process quickly became a nightmare. In the 5 years since I'd last looked for a place, rental prices in our city had skyrocketed. Places comparable to my current apartment were going for nearly twice what I was paying my parents. $2,300 for this, I muttered to myself during one lunch break viewing. The apartment was smaller than mine, with old appliances and a bathroom that needed updating. And it's a 20-minute drive further from my office. I spent my lunch breaks viewing apartments, my evenings filling out applications, and my bank account dwindling with application fees and credit check costs. The stress began to take a physical toll. My normally clear skin broke out, and I developed a persistent headache that no amount of ibuprofen seemed to touch. About a week into my apartment search, I received an unexpected text from Ryan, Jessica's fiancé. "Can we talk privately?" It read, "Not at your place or ours." Curious and a bit wary, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop downtown the next day. Ryan arrived looking tired with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that had him constantly fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I wanted you to know," he said after we'd exchanged awkward greetings, "that this wasn't my idea. I'm not comfortable with how your parents are treating you." I was surprised by his candor. "Then why go along with it?" Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Jessica, she can be persuasive. She told me it was already decided before she even brought it up with me. When I expressed concerns, she said I wasn't being supportive of her and the baby." He lowered his voice, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "The truth is, I'm worried about our relationship. Everything's moving so fast. The pregnancy, the engagement, now this apartment situation. I care about Jessica and I want to be there for my child, but I'm starting to wonder if we have a solid foundation." His confession took me by surprise. I had always seen Ryan as Jessica's quiet sidekick, not someone with his own concerns and opinions. "Have you talked to Jessica about these feelings?" I asked. He shook his head. "I've tried, but whenever I bring up any concerns, she gets upset and says I'm not committed to our family. Your parents back her up. They've made it clear they expect me to step up and provide for Jessica and the baby." I felt a surge of sympathy for Ryan, who seemed caught in a situation that was spiraling beyond his control, much like I was. "I appreciate you telling me this," I said, "but I'm not sure what I can do. My parents have made their decision." "I know," Ryan replied. "I just wanted you to know that not everyone thinks this is okay, and I'm sorry." As we parted ways, I promised Ryan I'd keep our conversation confidential. It was clear he was struggling with his own decisions, and while his apology didn't change my situation, it did help to know that someone in my family's inner circle recognized the injustice. After viewing nearly 20 apartments, I finally found one that, while not ideal, would work for my situation. It was smaller than my current place with one bedroom instead of two, and the rent was significantly higher at $2,300 per month. It was also further from my office, adding about 30 minutes to my daily commute. But it was clean, in a safe neighborhood, and available immediately. The application process was stressful. Amanda had to co-sign since the property management company required proof of income 3 times the rent amount, and my salary alone didn't quite meet their threshold. But eventually, I was approved, and a move-in date was set for the following week, giving me just enough time to pack and vacate my parents' apartment before their 30-day deadline. Packing up 5 years of life in less than a month was both physically and emotionally exhausting. Each item I wrapped and boxed represented a memory, a piece of the life I had built in a place I thought was secure. The bookshelves I had assembled myself. The kitchen gadgets I had collected over the years. The comfortable couch, where I'd spent countless evenings reading or watching movies, all of it had to be evaluated, packed, or in some cases given away to accommodate my new, smaller space. My mother called several times during this period, each conversation more awkward than the last. "Do you need help packing?" she asked during one call, as if she were offering assistance for an exciting new adventure rather than a forced relocation. No, thank you, I replied coolly. Amanda and some other friends are helping me. Oh, she sounded disappointed, perhaps even hurt. Well, let us know if you change your mind. The day before my move, Jessica came by the apartment ostensibly to see if I needed any help, but it quickly became clear she was there to measure spaces and plan her own move-in. I'm thinking the second bedroom will be perfect for the nursery, she said, standing in the doorway of what had been my home office. The morning light is so nice in here. I bit back a sharp response, focusing instead on taping up a box of kitchen items. You do realize I'm not completely moved out yet, right? Jessica had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I know, I just wanted to get some ideas. Mom and Dad said we can move in as soon as you're out. Of course they did, I muttered, but Jessica either didn't hear or chose to ignore my comment. Moving day arrived with a mixture of rain and unseasonably cold temperatures, a fitting metaphor for my mood. My parents had texted to offer help again, but I had declined, relying instead on Amanda and 3 other friends who had volunteered their Saturday to assist me. We worked throughout the day, loading boxes and furniture into the rented moving truck, making the 20-minute drive to my new apartment, and then unloading everything into a space that seemed to shrink with each box we brought in. By late afternoon, we had completed the move, and only the final walkthrough of my old apartment remained. I had asked my friends to go ahead to the new place to start unpacking while I handled this last task alone. I needed this private moment of closure. My father arrived for the walkthrough right on time, his expression a mixture of businesslike detachment and what might have been guilt. Everything looks good, he said after we had checked each room. You've left it in excellent condition. I always took good care of this place, I replied, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. It was my home. He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Yes, well, we appreciate that, and we hope you'll be happy in your new place. As I handed over my keys, I felt a finality that went beyond the simple act of moving out. I was handing over a piece of my relationship with my parents, acknowledging that our connection would never be quite the same again. Goodbye, Dad, I said, walking past him to my car, where the last few personal items were waiting to be taken to my new apartment. Violet, he called after me. This doesn't change anything. You're still family. I paused, but didn't turn around. It changes everything, I said quietly, then got into my car and drove away from the place I had called home for 5 years. The first weeks in my new apartment were challenging. Unpacking while maintaining my full-time job meant living among boxes for longer than I would have liked. The increased rent required budget adjustments, cutting back on small luxuries I had previously enjoyed without thought. My new commute ate into my morning routine, requiring earlier wake-up times and later returns home. But the most difficult adjustment was emotional. I felt displaced, not just physically, but within my family structure. Sunday dinners, once a constant in my life, had ceased. My parents texted occasionally with surface-level pleasantries, but the warmth and closeness we had once shared seemed to have evaporated. It was during this period of adjustment that I made an unexpected financial decision. Sitting at my kitchen table one evening, reviewing my new budget, I stared at the line item that read, Parents' Mortgage Payment, $1,500, the amount I had faithfully paid each month for 5 years. A thought occurred to me. Why was I still obligated to pay for an apartment I no longer occupied, especially when my eviction had been handled so callously? The next day, I consulted with a financial advisor about my rights and obligations regarding the apartment. Legally, since you had a month-to-month arrangement and have now vacated the property, you have no obligation to continue payments, the advisor confirmed. Your parents would need to pursue a separate agreement with their new tenants. That evening, I made a decision. I canceled the automatic payment to my parents' account and instead set up a transfer of that same amount, $1,500, into a separate savings account in my name. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about recognizing that our arrangement had been terminated by their choice, not mine. Little did I know that this simple financial decision would set off a chain reaction that would bring our family conflict to a breaking point. A week after I moved out, and the first of the month arrived, I received a confused text from my mother. "Hi, honey. The bank says there might be an error with your rent payment. Could you check on it?" I read the message several times, but chose not to respond immediately. I needed time to formulate exactly how I wanted to handle this situation. So I simply put my phone away and focused on settling into my new apartment. 3 days passed, and the texts grew more frequent. My father joined in his messages, progressively less polite. "Violet, we're still waiting for this month's rent payment. Please resolve this ASAP. The mortgage payment is due. We're counting on your contribution." Finally, a formal email arrived from my father's work address. "Violet, your failure to fulfill your financial responsibility regarding the apartment is concerning and unacceptable. We had an agreement and we expect you to honor it. Please remit payment immediately. Dad." I stared at the email, a complex mixture of emotions swirling within me. The audacity of my father to speak of financial responsibility and agreements after what they had done struck me as darkly ironic. I continued to let their messages go unanswered, partly because I was still processing my feelings, and partly because, for once, I wanted them to experience the uncertainty and anxiety they had caused me. On the 7th day after the missed payment, my mother called. I had been letting her calls go to voicemail, but this time, feeling stronger and clearer about my position, I decided to answer. "Violet, thank God," she said when I picked up. "We've been so worried. There seems to be a problem with the rent payment." I took a deep breath. "There's no problem, Mom. I've decided to stop making payments for an apartment I no longer live in." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, "But we had an agreement." "Yes, we did," I replied calmly. "I agreed to pay rent for an apartment I was living in. You and Dad decided to end that arrangement when you asked me to move out. I'm simply acknowledging that the agreement is over." "But we were counting on that money for the mortgage," she said, her voice rising with panic. "We can't afford the payment without it." "Then perhaps you should be charging rent to the people actually living there now," I suggested. "Jessica and Ryan." "They can't afford that," my mother exclaimed. "Jessica isn't working because of the pregnancy, and Ryan's personal training income is variable. They need time to get on their feet." "And I needed a home," I countered. "But that didn't seem to matter to any of you." My mother's tone shifted from panic to accusation. "I can't believe you would do this to your own family after everything we've done for you." I had to suppress a bitter laugh. "What exactly have you done for me lately? Mom kicked me out of my home to make room for Jessica. Made me spend thousands on moving expenses and higher rent. Please tell me what I should be grateful for." The conversation deteriorated from there, with my mother cycling through guilt trips, accusations of selfishness, and finally tearful pleas for reconsideration. I remained firm in my position. The automatic payments would not resume. If they wanted rent for the apartment, they would need to collect it from its current occupants. The ripple effects of my decision spread quickly through the family. Jessica called the next day, her voice sharp with entitlement. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded without preamble. "Mom and Dad are freaking out about the mortgage payment." "Hello to you too, Jessica," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Are you enjoying my former apartment?" "It's not your apartment," she snapped. "It belongs to Mom and Dad, and now you're trying to sabotage everything because you're jealous of my family." The accusation was so absurd that I almost laughed. "I'm not jealous of your situation, Jessica. I'm simply no longer subsidizing it. If you and Ryan want to live there, you should pay rent like any other tenants." "We can't afford that right now. You know that." "That sounds like a problem for you and our parents to solve," I said. "It's not my responsibility anymore." Jessica's voice turned nasty. You've always been selfish, Violet, always thinking about yourself and your precious career while I'm trying to start a family. I bet you're just bitter because you're alone. Her words stung, but I refused to let her see how they affected me. I'm going to hang up now, Jessica. I hope you and Ryan and the baby will be very happy in the apartment. I ended the call before she could respond, my hands shaking slightly but my resolve stronger than ever. I would not be manipulated or guilted into continuing financial support for people who had shown so little regard for my well-being. The day after Jessica's call, I received a text from Ryan. I understand why you stopped paying. Things are tense here. Your parents didn't expect this. I appreciated his acknowledgement, but didn't want to put him in an even more difficult position by engaging in a conversation that might get back to Jessica or my parents. I simply replied, "Thank you for understanding." Amanda was fully supportive of my decision when I told her about it over lunch. Good for you, she said, raising her iced tea in a mock toast. They can't have it both ways, playing favorites with Jessica and still expecting your financial support. Actions have consequences. Her validation helped strengthen my resolve in the face of increasingly desperate messages from my parents. As the weeks passed, I learned through Ryan's occasional texts that my parents were indeed facing financial pressure. They had apparently taken out a second mortgage on the apartment just before Jessica's pregnancy announcement, counting on my continued rent payments to cover the increased monthly obligation. They assumed you'd keep paying even after moving out, Amanda asked incredulously when I shared this information. That's delusional. They assumed I would do whatever they asked because I always have. I replied, the realization bringing clarity rather than bitterness. This is probably the first time I've really stood up for myself with them, and it felt good. Despite the financial adjustment of my higher rent, I was thriving in other ways. The distance from my family's toxic dynamics had improved my mental health. I felt lighter, less anxious, more focused. This newfound clarity and confidence even translated to my professional life. 3 months after moving, I was offered a promotion at work with a salary increase that helped offset some of my increased living expenses. For 6 months, the stalemate continued. My parents' messages became less frequent but more desperate. Jessica, now heavily pregnant according to the baby shower invitation I had politely declined, had stopped contacting me entirely. Ryan's occasional texts provided glimpses into a situation growing increasingly dire. My parents were facing potential foreclosure on the apartment, and Jessica and Ryan's relationship was showing strain under the financial pressure. I continued setting aside the $1,500 each month in the separate savings account, not out of any obligation to my parents, but as a safety net for myself. The account grew steadily, providing a sense of security and options for the future. Then, 6 months to the day after I had moved out, the situation reached its breaking point. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was in the middle of a meeting with clients when my assistant slipped me a note. "Your father is in the lobby, says it's urgent." I excused myself, promising to return shortly, and made my way to the lobby with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. My father stood awkwardly by the reception desk, looking older and more tired than I remembered. His usually immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and his normally perfect hair uncombed. "Dad," I greeted him coolly. "This is unexpected." He glanced around the busy lobby. "Can we talk somewhere private?" I led him to a small conference room off the main area and closed the door. "I have clients waiting, so I can only spare a few minutes." He nodded, then seemed to struggle with where to begin. Finally, he sighed deeply. "We're in trouble, Violet. Financial trouble." I waited, saying nothing. "The bank has started foreclosure proceedings on the apartment," he continued. "Without your rent payments, we haven't been able to keep up with the mortgages." "Mortgages," I repeated. "Plural." He nodded, looking ashamed. "We took out a second mortgage right before Jessica told us about the baby. We had some investment losses we were trying to cover. We thought, he trailed off. You thought I would keep paying rent for an apartment you kicked me out of. I finished for him. He didn't deny it. We need your help, Violet. We could lose the apartment and Jessica and Ryan would have nowhere to go with the baby coming any day now. What about their rent payments? I asked. Surely they've been contributing something. My father looked away. They were supposed to start paying a small amount after 3 months, but Ryan's hours at the gym were cut, and Jessica hasn't been feeling well enough to work. They haven't been able to pay anything. I wasn't surprised, but the confirmation still stung. So you evicted your reliable tenant for ones who don't pay at all? We didn't think of it that way, he protested weakly. We were just trying to help Jessica. At my expense, I pointed out. He had no answer for that. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. There's something else you should know. Ryan left Jessica 3 days ago. This news did surprise me. Left her with the baby due so soon? My father nodded grimly. He said he couldn't do it anymore, that their relationship wasn't built on the right foundation. He left this letter for Jessica, but she hasn't opened it yet. She's too upset. He handed me the envelope. Ryan asked me to give this to you. He said you should read it before making any decisions about helping us. I took the envelope cautiously. Why would Ryan want me to read a letter he wrote to Jessica? It's not from Ryan, my father explained. It's a letter Jessica wrote but never sent. Ryan found it when he was packing his things. Confused but curious, I opened the envelope and unfolded a sheet of paper covered in Jessica's loopy handwriting. As I read, my stomach tightened with each sentence. The letter, dated 2 weeks before the dinner where I was asked to move out, was addressed to her friend, Megan. In it, Jessica outlined a plan to secure the apartment for herself and Ryan by convincing our parents that they needed it for the baby. She admitted that the pregnancy, while not planned, had become a convenient tool for manipulating our parents and securing financial support. Most disturbingly, she wrote, Violet's always been Dad and Mom's ATM. She'll keep paying the rent even after she moves out because she's so desperate for their approval. They'll make sure of it. Meanwhile, Ryan and I get a free place to live and I can focus on my influencer career without worrying about a 9 to 5. I read the letter twice, making sure I hadn't misunderstood. Then I looked up at my father, whose expression told me he'd already read it. Did you know? I asked quietly. Did you know this was her plan all along? He shook his head, looking genuinely devastated. No, I swear we didn't. We thought we were helping Jessica prepare for the baby. We never intended... He trailed off again. You never intended for me to stop paying, I finished. You thought I would continue to financially support all of you even after being treated so poorly. My father's silence was confirmation enough. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I need to get back to my meeting, and I need time to think about all this. Please, Violet, my father said, his voice breaking slightly. We could lose everything. We need your help. I looked at him, this man who had raised me, who had taught me about responsibility and family loyalty, yet who had failed to apply those same principles when it came to treating me fairly. I'll think about it, I said, not out of cruelty, but because I genuinely needed time to process this new information and decide how to respond. I'll call you tomorrow. As I watched my father leave the building, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. The letter had confirmed what part of me had suspected all along, that I had been used and taken for granted by the people who should have valued me the most. But now I faced a complex decision after all that had happened. Did I owe my family anything? And if I chose to help them, what would that help look like? These were questions that required careful consideration, not a reactive response born from either anger or guilt. That evening, I called my therapist, Dr. Monroe, whom I had started seeing shortly after moving to help process the family betrayal. I explained the day's revelations and my conflicted feelings. "It sounds like you're at a crossroads," Dr. Monroe observed. "On one hand, your family has treated you unfairly and taken advantage of your generosity. On the other hand, despite their actions, you still care about them and don't want to see them suffer." "Exactly," I confirmed. "Part of me wants to say, 'You made your bed, now lie in it.' But another part recognizes that my parents at least were also manipulated by Jessica to some extent." "What outcome would align with your values?" Dr. Monroe asked. "Not what would make your family happy or what would feel satisfying in the moment, but what action would reflect the person you want to be." It was a powerful question, one that stayed with me as I considered my options. By the time I fell asleep that night, I had made my decision about how to move forward, not just for my family's sake, but for my own. 3 days after my father's office visit, I arranged for a family meeting at a neutral location, a private room at La Maison, an upscale restaurant downtown. I requested that both my parents attend, as well as Jessica. Ryan had already left town, according to my father, returning to his hometown several hours away. I arrived early, setting up the small conference room with the materials I had prepared. Documentation of the apartment's payment history, copies of relevant communications, and a typed proposal for moving forward. I was nervous, but resolute, knowing that this conversation would reshape our family dynamic one way or another. My parents arrived first, looking anxious and tired. My mother hugged me tentatively, and I allowed it, though I didn't return the embrace with my usual warmth. My father nodded awkwardly, unsure of his welcome after our last encounter. Jessica arrived 10 minutes late, her pregnant belly now prominent under her loose dress. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, and she avoided looking directly at me as she took a seat across the table. Once everyone was settled, and the waiter had brought water and taken orders for drinks, I cleared my throat to begin. "Thank you all for coming," I said formally. "I've asked for this meeting because we need to have an honest conversation about what's happened and how we move forward from here." I placed the letter Jessica had written on the table. "I've read this, and I know you all have too. It makes clear that there was manipulation involved in the decision to evict me from the apartment. Jessica, would you like to say anything about this?" Jessica stared at the letter, tears welling in her eyes. For a moment, I thought she would deny writing it or try to explain it away. Instead, she surprised me. "I'm sorry," she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I was selfish and manipulative. I used my pregnancy to get what I wanted without thinking about how it would hurt you." Her apology, while simple, seemed genuine. I nodded, acknowledging her words before turning to my parents. "Mom, Dad, I understand that you were trying to support Jessica and her baby. But I need you to understand how deeply your actions hurt me. For 5 years, I was a perfect tenant. I maintained your property. I never missed a payment. I was the reliable daughter you could always count on. Yet when Jessica needed something, you didn't hesitate to discard me and our arrangement." My mother wiped away tears. "We never meant to discard you, Violet. We just got caught up in the excitement of the baby and wanting to help Jessica." "But that's a pattern," I pointed out. "All my life, Jessica's needs have taken precedence over mine. When she dropped out of college, you paid for her apartment. When she wanted to try modeling, you funded her portfolio. When her relationships ended, you welcomed her home with open arms. Meanwhile, I put myself through graduate school, built my career through hard work, and never asked for special treatment." My father looked uncomfortable, but didn't deny my assessment. "We may have taken you for granted because you were always so capable," he admitted quietly. "Being capable doesn't mean I don't need support or consideration." I replied. It doesn't mean my needs matter less. I took a deep breath and placed my proposal on the table. Now, about the current situation. I understand that you're facing foreclosure on the apartment. I've been setting aside the $500 I used to pay in rent each month. I now have $9,000 saved. My parents' expressions brightened with hope, but I held up a hand to indicate I wasn't finished. I'm willing to help with 3 months of mortgage payments to give you time to figure out a sustainable solution, but my help comes with conditions. I slid the typed proposal toward them. First, I want us to attend family therapy together. Not just one session, but weekly for at least 3 months. We need to address the long-standing patterns that led to this situation. Jessica looked up in surprise while my parents exchanged glances. Second, I want you both to attend financial counseling. The fact that you took out a second mortgage and then made decisions assuming I would continue to support you financially suggests you need help with money management. My father started to protest, but my mother placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. Third, I want a formal, written agreement about any financial arrangements between us going forward. No more handshake deals or family rates. Everything needs to be transparent and documented. I looked at each of them in turn. These are my terms. I'm not offering to solve all your problems or to resume indefinite financial support. I'm offering a temporary bridge and a path to healthier relationships. The choice is yours. The silence that followed was heavy with consideration. My parents whispered to each other, while Jessica stared at her hands, occasionally wiping away tears. Finally, my father spoke. We agree to your terms, all of them, and I want to say I'm sorry, Violet. You deserved better from us. My mother nodded, tears flowing freely now. We love you so much, sweetheart. We never meant to hurt you. We want to make this right. Jessica looked up, her expression vulnerable in a way I rarely saw. I'm sorry too, Vi, for everything. The letter, the manipulation, the things I said to you on the phone. Ryan left because he said he couldn't build a life with someone who would treat her own sister that way. He was right. Their apologies were a start, but I knew that rebuilding trust would take time and consistent effort. Then we'll try this new approach, I said. I'll transfer the first month's payment tomorrow and we'll schedule our first therapy session this week. As we finished our meal and prepared to leave, my mother asked hesitantly, Will you come to Sunday dinner this weekend? We've missed you. I considered her invitation.
Let's start with therapy first, I suggested gently. We need to do the work before we try to return to our old routines. She nodded, accepting my boundary, perhaps for the first time. As promised, the next day, I transferred the first month's payment to my parents' account and scheduled our first family therapy session with Dr. Catherine Bell, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. The initial sessions were uncomfortable and awkward. Years of unspoken resentments, expectations, and patterns emerged, sometimes leading to tears and raised voices. Dr. Bell skillfully guided us through these difficult conversations, helping us see how each person's actions affected the others. My parents, to their credit, engaged sincerely with the process. They acknowledged their pattern of enabling Jessica while taking my reliability for granted. My mother cried when she realized how many times I had felt unseen or undervalued. My father struggled to articulate his emotions, but made a genuine effort to understand the impact of his decisions. Jessica's participation was initially sporadic as she dealt with the final weeks of her pregnancy and the aftermath of Ryan's departure. After giving birth to a healthy baby boy named Ethan, she began attending more regularly, often bringing the infant with her. The presence of baby Ethan changed the dynamic in unexpected ways. Holding her son seemed to give Jessica a new perspective on family relationships and responsibilities. I don't want Ethan to grow up thinking it's okay to treat people the way I treated you, she told me during one particularly emotional session. As the weeks passed, our relationships began to heal, not by returning to old patterns, but by establishing new, healthier ones, based on mutual respect and clear boundaries.
My parents completed their financial counseling and developed a sustainable plan for the apartment that didn't rely on my contribution. Jessica began exploring work-from-home opportunities that would allow her to support herself and Ethan. As for me, I discovered that setting boundaries wasn't just about saying no, it was about defining my worth and expecting others to honor it. The experience had transformed me from a people-pleaser who sought approval through compliance to someone who understood that true family support flows in all directions and is built on respect, not obligation. 6 months after our initial family meeting, I hosted Sunday dinner at my apartment for the first time. As we gathered around my small dining table, my parents, Jessica, with baby Ethan, and even Amanda, who had been my rock throughout this journey, the conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years.
Looking around at these familiar faces, I realized that our family hadn't been broken by the conflict we had endured. It had been remade into something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more loving. The apartment that had been the center of our conflict was now just a piece of property, no longer a symbol of favoritism or resentment. My parents had found new tenants who paid fair market rent. Jessica and Ethan had moved into a modest apartment that she could afford with her new remote job, and I had renewed my lease, making my once temporary place truly feel like home. The journey hadn't been easy, and there were still moments of tension or old patterns trying to reassert themselves. But we now had the tools and awareness to recognize and address these issues before they could take root again. As I cleared the plates that evening, my mother followed me into the kitchen. "I'm so proud of you, Violet," she said softly.
Not just for your success at work or how beautifully you've made this place your home, but for having the courage to stand up for yourself when we were wrong. Her words, sincere and without qualification, were a healing balm to the wounds that had once seemed so raw. That night, after everyone had left, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights, reflecting on the lessons of the past year. I had learned that true love doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment, even from family. That setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for healthy relationships. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling harmful patterns. Most importantly, I had learned that family bonds aren't just given, they're also chosen, nurtured, and sometimes renegotiated. The painful experience had led to growth and authenticity that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. I'm curious to hear from you. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? How did it change your relationships? Let me know in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's essential for genuine, healthy relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own journey to authentic connections.